Right, good morning everybody and welcome to the second session of Dairy Tech Online. I'm Matthew Knight, Managing Director of the RABDF, and I've got the great pleasure in welcoming all of you today. We hope you find this session useful and get some really good insight to the benefits of robots on a dairy farm. So without further ado, I will introduce today's chair, who's John Allen. He's got a plethora of knowledge within dairy farming and the supply industry. He sits on many industry groups which are aimed at progressing our industry, and also, as probably everybody knows, he heads up Kite Consulting, who's been serving our industry for well over 20 years. So, John, over to you.
Matt.
I haven't suggested font size. I only suggested size 96, and it's not size 96, so that's not on me.
Right, John, just before you start, can everyone mute themselves and turn their cameras off, if that's okay?
Oh, don't worry, Matt. Okay, all right, thank you. I hope that's worked, and I hope everybody can hear me. Just put the thumbs up. Thanks, Matt. That's great. Thanks for that introduction. It's great to be with you all in Zoom land. It's a real shame we can't be at Dairy Tech today, hosting you and having some hospitality together. But anyway, we will get on because we'll win through, and we look forward to seeing you next year. But for this year, RABDF has put together a great programme with lots of different papers and lots of different topics. So I'm delighted to be chairing this session on behalf of Laylee. We've got some three great speakers, and so I'm going to crack on as quickly as possible. Got 15 minutes for each paper, and then there'll be 15 minutes or so at the end. So the sooner we start and the sooner I shut up, the more you'll get on and the more you'll have a chance to ask questions. Please send your questions through and I'll get those. Our first speaker today is Robert Sloan. I do apologise, Robert. We had a technical hitch. We didn't think we'd get Robert on first a few minutes ago. So Robert's done well to get himself linked in. So thank you very much. Robert is a member of a family partnership, the firm of Bryce Sloan, farming up in Dumfries. And he farms along with his wife Emma and his 2-year-old son Will and 4-month-old daughter Maeve. I think they're going to be well behaved today from what I can see. They milk around 190 pedigree Holsteins under the town law prefix, and they average about 12,000 kilos. They're milked 3 times on average a day through a Laylee A4 robot since 2011. Sorry, that's what we're going to hear about. In addition, interestingly, they also milk 75 pedigree jerseys under the Darn law prefix, and they actually milk through the old existing conventional parlour. And they've been there since 2016, and they're averaging an amazing 7,000 litres at over 10% solids. So a fantastic performance there from those jerseys. Notably, you'll know that Robert is the current holder of the RABDF Gold Cup. So we've got a really top-notch speaker to lead us off. So Robert, I'll pass over to you. All the best.
Thank you very much, John. I would like to think my talk today is quite light-hearted. I've not got too many facts and figures. I'm just quite keen to talk about the honest ups and downs over the last 10 years that we've had with robots, as long as wee bits and bobs that's kind of relative to our farm as well. I'd like to thank Laylee and RABDF for asking me to speak today. I hope they don't regret that in 15 minutes' time. I'm sure they won't know. Wait and I'll see if I can get this just to move on. Or could somebody maybe move the screen on for me, please? Struggling to take control of the slides here. If there's anybody that can move it on for us, please. There we go. We've got 4 distinct enterprises within our farm. We own about 300 acres. We rent around 200. So within those 4 distinct enterprises, we've got 185 Holsteins, which are milked in robots, 75 jerseys, We've 320 female young stock, so we've a lot of young stock coming in behind us. And our most recent enterprise is beef young stock. So we're finishing crossbred beef calves, mainly Limousin and Belgian Blue. So it's just another part of the business which complements the other 3 areas of the business to create a circular type of farming where each individual enterprise is really complementing the next. Next slide, please. So our strength is in growing grass. So we're farming in Ayrshire, so on quite a wet part of the world. We have 61 inches of rainfall in 2020, which is quite significant. I'm sure you'll agree. So our window really for harvesting crops goes from the 1st of May to the 1st of September. We keep it very simple, so we're running 2 cuts of silage so that we get everything done within that period of time. We actually share our silage making equipment with my uncle, so we're chopping around 1,100 acres annually. We've got no maize because it's too late in the season. We've no combinable crops either because it's too late in the season. So our strength is in growing grass, and good forage is critical to make the robots work. So arguably the expense of running our own forage making equipment is outweighed by the ability to make really good silage, because that is really key to the success of milking cows. Next slide, please. Our own form of diversification, if that's the trendy word for it, is our Jersey herd. They were established in 2016. It was brought in after an AB quota was brought in through our milk buyer Graham's, and we decided to downsize the black and white herd, and we started the Jersey herd as a completely separate enterprise. So it is going into they went into what was our existing parlour system, and they're milked conventionally through the parlour. We're averaging decent solids in them. They're actually quite a nice addition to the whole farming enterprise that we've got. We graze both the young stock and the beef animals, and the Jerseys are grazed in the summer as well. Next slide, please. So the robot shed itself, our main reason for putting in robots was we wanted to milk our cows 3 times a day. I think the type of cow that we have bred suits being milked 3 times a day to try and get longevity out of the cow. Our farm is becoming increasingly difficult to graze, just with a really short window that we get in the summertime, and the amount of rainfall that we get as well. So we're having really big issues trying to keep grazing cattle on this farm. Our big cattle anyway, their Holsteins are quite a sizable cow, whereas the Jerseys are a wee bit smaller, so you get away with grazing them a wee bit easier. So we built really, and for the right environment, to keep cows in 365 days in the year. We've got hoosker curtains on both sides of the shed. The west side is open to the there's no lot between us and America, so we've actually got quite a good airflow right through that shed in the summertime, and probably the shed's at its best in the middle of summer in nice weather. We've got a nice cool breeze blowing through the shed. The cows are in shelter from the sun, and it's actually a really nice environment in the summertime. We've got Cryberg rubber flooring in the feed passages, so the cows don't get concrete sick. We've been in all the time. And another reason the robots have been quite a good addition, and it was thought of when we installed them, but the public perception side of robots is quite a good thing, because a cow's actually making the decisions to go and get milked on her own within this system. And when you've got a lot of people on the farm, which we do through school visits and other visits as well, it's actually quite a friendly system to explain to the public, because the cow herself. And that's something we've maybe found of increasing importance over the last 10 years since we installed the robots. Next slide, please. So we built the shed in 2011. I visited around 20 robot farms before we decided to start digging. We designed the whole shed on computer-aided design. There was loads of wee things that we did within the design after speaking to other farmers. And to be honest with you, there was 2 or 3 farmers that were really honest about the system, and they were the ones that I've always been very grateful for, because they were the ones that just gave me the pros and the cons, and like any system, it has its downsides and its upsides, but I had a clear understanding before we started building of what was going to be involved. So just a lot of wee things, like there was no end walls in the cubicles so that the cows can see the robots from the cubicle beds when they're a wee bit quieter. There's no water troughs and brushes at the robots to keep the traffic away from there. So the only reason they come to the robots is to be milked. The robot rooms are quite dark, and it just makes training heifers that wee bit easier. It settles everybody down because it's not too bright. And there's no solid walls at the robot entry points. So the cows have got a really good natural flow coming to the robots, and we've always had really good visits in the shed. Next slide, please. The first two robots were installed in November 2011. We've always run the robots at full capacity. The costs of running the robots are the same, whether you're running them at half capacity or full capacity. And for me, financially, to justify it, I've always had to run them at full capacity. So the first robots went in and we were still milking in the parlour alongside it. So after 2 years, we built the herd up a wee bit further using the parlour, and then installed a third robot in 2013. And at that time, we were still running the parlour for late lactation cows and heifers as well. So the 3 robots were running really efficiently at that point with the parlour alongside it. The service is absolute key to the success of the system, and it will really dictate if you decide what colour of robot you decide to put in, is really dictated by the quality of the service you get from your local service centre. We've always been really lucky in that fact he's just down the road from where we are. Over the last 10 years, the robots probably do the opposite of what you'd expect to do, but they've actually become more reliable as time has went on. We've probably halved our call outs. So I would say on an average I get called out about once every 10 days during the day, and about once every 3 weeks during the night. But that's not to say you could be called out 3 nights in a row as well. You get those times as well, but you can also go a spell where you don't go out for 3 months. There's been loads of wee things over the years where the robots have been upgraded. The robots have been upgraded just to make things run a wee bit better. So there's twin tube covers rather than Jubilee clips holding them onto the clusters. The vacuum pumps are lubricated now. Vacuum regulator valves were upgraded, and our most recent one was actually upgraded with A4 lasers to A5 lasers. So it's nice that once you actually buy a robot, that Lely continually reinvest in upgrades to make the system run even more efficiently all the time. So that's a definite benefit. Next slide, please. So the result of that really is it's a very simple ration we're running. So we're running a 27 litre ration. Our overall feed rate, including the TMR down the fence, is 0.37, 0.17 in the robots. We're running 2 feed types. So we've got a high protein cake to the late lactation cows and a high energy cake to the early lactation cows. Currently averaging, we're actually just over 40 this week, but we always sit between 38 and 40 and about there somewhere. The visits sit quite steady at 3.4, 3.2. Over 2020, with 161 cows was the average number on the 3 robots. And that's the amount of milk we've produced, just over 2.1 million litres, with 185 cows total on the farm as an average. So we're just over 707,000 litres per robot. There's probably scope in there to get that up a wee bit. Last year we had to slow down because of COVID, so we produced less up through the kind of late springtime. For that reason, we're averaging maybe 150 cows in the robot at that time. But there is scope there to do a wee bit more. We probably produce for most milk when we're running 3 robots and the parlour together, but I actually prefer robots and all the cows being in this system, because the cows actually hated changing system, going from the robots back to the parlour. I think I'm actually more comfortable taking a wee bit less milk off the robots, but not having the parlour running next to it and milking slightly fewer cows for that reason. We've quite decent free time at the moment, 14%, just because we've had to slow down a wee bit. I would say ultimately we could get to 750,000 litres per robot if everything was working right and we managed to make good forage as well. Next slide, please. So what's been the result of the last 10 years is is seen in the cow's performance really. Our number one priority has always been the welfare of the cows before anything else really. The replacement rate over the last 5 years has run between 16 and 24%, just depending what our milk buyers are after. We've had 2,000 ton cows, and 14 of those were in the last 4 years. So virtually all those cows in the last 4 years were achieved that amount of milk in robots. We were awarded one Master Breeder Award in 2018, and that's just been off of the back of the robots as well. We do actually run slightly extended lactations in the robots. The system we're running probably allows for that because we're not feeding too hard down the fence, and then we're feeding in the robots to try and encourage a long level lactation curve. There's certain cows in the herd that, to be honest, I don't believe need to calve every year, and we tend to let them run on a wee bit longer. And the consequence of that is that our cumulative yield runs over to just over 14,000 kilos in a 419-day calving interval. A lot of these cows are actually having a really long level lactation curve. There's actually not a huge curve at all, just the way we've managed to set the system up. But it's just the type of cow that we've got that really does suit that system. Next slide, please. We built our calf shed in 2018. We've got Volac automatic calf feeders in there. Stock sales are a big part of our business, and I'll explain to you a wee bit more about that in a wee minute. It actually equated to the equivalent of 9 pence a litre through 2020, so it's a significant part of our business. The last 3 years really has seen an increased demand for robot trained heifers as more robots have came online. 2 or 3 flying herd people run about us have got robots now. We're probably selling about 50% of the stock we're rearing, and of that 50%, about 80% will go to other robot farms, and then the remaining 20% will be maybe heifers that are going to end up causing problems in robots for being a wee bit closer to back teats, and we sell them maybe more to parlour guys. But most of the heifers we're actually rearing and selling as robot trained heifers, which is actually just gives us something that wee bit different when you're coming to sell a lot of cattle. Next slide, please. We've probably had our fair share of COVID issues in the last year. 3 cycles now where we've had staff off self-isolating. I remember a staff who was actually positive over Christmas there. And I think out of all the years that we've had robots, the last year has probably been the most important. It makes things an awful lot more flexible when you do have these staffing issues, because you can actually run it just with 1 or 2 people. It's quite nice just to be able to, if somebody isn't able to come out for whatever reason, then the actual system isn't put under pressure, and we just move our time to when the staff's back again to do like routine jobs like vaccinations and stuff, or moving slurry, or clipping cows, or steam cleaning. Those jobs can actually be sat to the side until the staffing side of it's sorted out. Time is much more flexible in robots. We really start at 6 in the morning and we finish at 6 at night, and we try and do everything within those hours. A lot of there's 3 boys working for us, and their time's really spent during the day, so I'm not trying to employ labour to milk at 4 o'clock in the morning, or if we were doing a third milking, you'd be asking staff to come out and milk from 8 to midnight. So it's a wee bit easier to find staff because you're not asking people to work these really antisocial hours. The issue we've maybe had a wee bit is we've got 3 robots running, and if we just had 3 robots and nothing else, then we could run it quite simply, just myself and my dad. But that's all fine and well until I go on holiday, or Dad gets to an age where he doesn't want to milk cows anymore. He has to do a wee bit less because he has getting a wee bit older. So we've always been trying to grow the farm so that our farm's big enough to justify having labour in the farm. In Scotland, it's a wee bit of a problem where there's probably much enough milk as it is without anybody producing any more. Our milk buyer certainly wouldn't allow me to produce any more black and white milk than we do now. So that's why we've had to look at different enterprises. So we've got the beef side of it, we've got the Jersey side of it, and the young stock side of it is the ones that probably takes up the most time. It takes quite a bit of running, just rearing all that young stock, and then you're actually having to take the time to sell those cattle as well. But we've just structured the business in a way so that we can actually justify having labour there. So it's nice that if I want to go away on holiday or somebody's no well, then there's a good people around us just to fill in the holes, and they're very competent at running it, and they're all pretty young guys as well. They're all kind of 23, 24 years old, and their time is very flexible as well, so it suits them as well. So we've never had a big massive issue finding labour and keeping labour because we are so flexible with staff. So the staffing issue is probably the biggest bonus with robots, really. The biggest downside's probably been on call all the time. You're on call 24/7, and some folk don't really take to that. The way I look at it is it's usually me that's on call to it, but as long as I've got good reliable people that can take the phone to allow me to go off the farm, then I doesn't really see that as an issue, to be honest with you. In the future, will I put the jerseys in the robots? It's probably the biggest question I get asked. I would really need to sit down and look at other people's systems to decide that. The jersey's quite a different breed from what the black and whites are, and the milk contract we've got with the jerseys is really geared for components. So I'd need to just see how much those components would be diluted if we moved to a 3 times a day milking system with the jerseys. But certainly the type of black and white cow we've got really does suit the robotic system. But if I was to really look at the jerseys, I would need to just go and do my homework in that in the future. Next slide, please. I'd just like to thank everybody for listening. If you've got any questions, don't be frightened to ask. I hope you've found it fairly interesting and fairly honest as to what our last 10 years have been. And I'll just pass you back to John, please. Thank you very much.
Robert, that's excellent. Right, thank you very much. Great introductory paper there. So we've now got, I think, George Lester. I see you with us, George. So hopefully you're going to take over and give us your comments. George was actually born and raised on his parents' farm in Shropshire. He's got a master's degree actually in biomedical science from Southampton University, and I know from having met him the other day, he's very much into the data side, and hopefully he'll share some of that with us. He came home to form a partnership with his parents, developing the business from a single Lely A3 to the current Greenfield site, which I know you'll find of great interest. And George, I'll let you pick up and we'll take questions for the whole group at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I'd like to thank Lely and the RABDF for asking me to speak. You've heard a bit from Robert about what it's like living with robotic milking, and now we're going to have a look at what we can draw from the data that the robots bring us on a daily basis. Oh, there we go. So a bit about our farm. So our farm's been in the family for a couple of 100 years, but a proper commercial dairy farm was established in the 1950s by my grandfather. We had a single A3 robot initially installed in 2008, just as the credit crisis happened, and we finally moved on in 2017 to a greenfield site now with 2 A4s, an A5 and a vector feeding system, and the herd's currently doing 11,000 litres at 24% preg rate. So we initially went to, or explored Lely robots or robotic milking. My dad saw some milking going on with robots over in Holland while he was on an ADAS trip looking at silage making. And what really drew us to the robots was that our herdsman was looking to retire. He's getting quite old and his hygiene in the parlour wasn't brilliant. He'd start off quite well and then it would go on, and by the end of the milking he wasn't rinsing the cups out properly and that sort of thing, having cell count issues. So we really like the fact that the robot does 100% job, does every time, doesn't, not lazy. It doesn't take time off apart from the way it breaks down. So then we had planned to build our new dairy farm in 2008, as I talked about before, just as the credit crisis happened.
Yeah, I was worried that something is not right.
We couldn't, it's all right, it's muted now. We couldn't sell our old dairy farm for development, so we decided we'd install one A3 and learn. And then eventually we got the finances together and sold our old farm to build our new greenfield site slightly further down the road, still on our land. We did consider a few other brands as we were looking to upgrade our farm, but there wasn't the backup or services Robert alluded to. That was really important to us, that as soon as it breaks down, you're not making any milk, you're not making any money. And other companies didn't seem to be quite as forthcoming with a 24-hour-a-day backup. And also we built up 10 years worth of data with Lely and for our cows, and we wanted to continue that over into our new herd. So the data, as far as I see, comes into two different sets. We've got the cow performance and the robot performance themselves. With the cows, we get data every milking, every time. So rather than just as and when data is recorded, every time the cow goes into the robot, whether she's milked or not, all the data from activity, so the usual health data like bulling is recorded, ruminations are recorded, the weight, if there's weigh scales, is recorded. And the weight is really important from a long-term health point of view, in that we can check that cows are not putting on too much weight or losing too much weight throughout their lactation. Some farmers only start serving cows once they're putting on weight, which if we don't know what the weights of the animals are, it's very difficult to find that out. And something that we find really useful is the ruminations. This is much more short-term, sort of in terms of hours or days, whereas the weight can be in weeks and months. So an example of the rumination data that we can take off the robots. Here's a cow from calving to 77 days in lactation. We're looking at the black line is her milk production and the light blue line is her ruminations activity. We can see to start with, a couple of days, the milk starts to pick up and the ruminations pick up to normal. And she has about a month of normal milking, good milk production, nothing wrong with the ruminations. And then turns out this cow's had a twisted stomach, and we can see the ruminations and the milk drop off very rapidly. So we were able to try glycoling this animal to start with, the propylene glycol, and that had no effect. So in the end, we had to call the vet out for a DA. And quite interestingly, we can see the ruminations after the operation, the ruminations pick up much quicker than the milk does. So we're able to tell whether this cow, even though she may be still looking poor, may not be giving much milk, if those ruminations have come back up to normal, this cow is going to be okay. May save a vet call out again for a further checkup. If we can see that her ruminations are back up to normal, this cow will be all right. Another interesting point with ruminations is cows quite often have a dip in ruminations at bulling. It's not 100%, and just because there's a drop in ruminations doesn't mean the cow is bulling. But as you can see on the example here, we've got an activity spike and a rumination drop. Just gives us an extra bit of information to know that this cow definitely needs serving. She's not just been running around or had some other disturbance. Oh, I'll go back. Oh, sorry. We also get a lot of other health information. So we get a lot of mastitis information, such as the color of the milk, the conductivity of the milk. We have a somatic cell count checker on one of our robots for any cows that we think have got a particular chance of having high cell counts. That's all brought up into a report, so we get really interesting information very quickly about cows that may or may not have problems, and we can go and treat them straight away rather than problems persisting for a number of days and relying on the cell count information back from the bulk tank to show that we may have a problem with mastitis in the herd. So in terms of the robot performance data, this again comes in two parts. There's the cow interaction, so we get to know how the cows are interacting with the robot, obviously how much milk they're producing, but quite importantly, factors like how much free time there is on the robots. As Robert alluded to, he's running at about 14%. It's quite tempting to think we want no free time on the robots, but we need free time for a couple of different reasons. Things like if you have a breakdown, if you're running at 100, no free time, then your cows will never have a chance to catch up. And also lower ranking cows or heifers that are a bit nervous to come to the robot, if the robot's quiet and there's no cows hanging around, they might think, oh, I'll just go and have a look in there and go and get myself milked. Whereas if there's always cows waiting in the robot, those lower ranking cows won't have any confidence to go up to the robot. We're also told about how many failures there are and how many visits the cows are going to, how many visits the cows are taking per milking. And then we get to see the milking performance of how well the robots are actually milking the cows. So we are told the treatment times, of how long it takes to brush the cow's teats, to spray the cows with teat dip afterwards. We can see the dead milk time. So that's obviously a factor with the stimulation from the brushing. And we may want to increase or decrease the brushing time if the dead milk time is incorrect. We see the box time of the visits. So how long the cow is physically, how long it takes from the cow to walk in to the cow to walk back out. And there are various different sections of problems that may arise with the milking performance, and the data is all monitored and flagged up in a report. Here's an example of the robot performance report. So we can see each of our 3 robots. There's lots of data, lots of parameters that are monitored, and quite importantly, rather than having to sift through all the information, anything that seems to be an issue is flagged up. So for example, here we've got increased milk time on the left rear and the right rear of robot 3. So it may be that some sensors are incorrect. It may be that the vacuum or the pulsation has gone wrong, and that allows us to go and investigate what the issue is without having to spend half an hour trying to decipher lots of numbers before we can come up with the answer. With the robot performance, it is a very delicate balance to keep everything in line. It's not as simple as changing one parameter, allowing cows to be milked more often, less often, brushed more, brushed less. There's a whole balance of factors that need to be looked at when changing, when trying to improve the efficiency. It's a lot easier to talk to your FMS person rather than try and change lots of data yourself. So this is the T4C homepage with all of the, with a selected amount of information brought up, so we can see it at a glance, and we can see the free time, treatment time, box time, and the number of failures in the robot. So if anything is in the red marks or flashing with a red button, it allows us efficiently just to go and dive into that problem and find out what the issue is, rather than having to, again, sift through massive amount of data to try and work out what's going on. So Lely is moving away from T4C and onto Horizon now, which is their new computer software with a number of improvements over T4C, some of which Elizabeth will talk about shortly. But we, for an example, at the moment, we use Uniform as well to run our whole herd management, because T4C does have some drawbacks in terms of whole herd management. It's brilliant on individual cow data, but not so much on whole herd trends and third-party connectivity, which Horizon is going to try and address as part of the software. But what's really interesting for me in terms of what Horizon's going to offer is the advice. T4C really gives you a lot of data. It may flag up the issues, but it doesn't tell you or give you recommendations as to what you should do with those issues. So it will tell you all the failures that your cows are having and why they failed, but it doesn't say, we recommend that you dry this cow off, or that you milk this cow under supervision. So you might need to be there just to watch the cow if she's particularly jumpy. You might need to be there just to rub her back to make sure that she's calm, and it allows the teats to, allows the cups to connect to the teats easily. There's also the keep open advice, which is once you've set up your breeding protocols, instead of just flagging up the bulling cows like T4C does, it may say, well, this cow is bulling, but we would recommend that she's too many days in milk, and she's had several mastitis cases, or she's just not a particularly profitable cow, and we would recommend that you leave this cow open, don't serve her, and that will be more efficient for your herd. There's also the ketosis advice. So several programs look at this, but it's looking at the early lactation performance and recommending whether the robot believes that the cow is ketotic, you might want to, well, at the worst, call the vet, but hopefully a couple of doses of propylene glycol will just get over her ketosis and she'll be off into her lactation much more quickly and efficiently. And the final thing that's really interesting from my point of view is the concentrate optimizer. Now, this is a piece of software that comes along with Horizon that will monitor each cow individually on a feed table. So rather than setting up feed tables for one, maybe perhaps 2 or 3 groups, an early lactation or highs and lows, and having a feed table for each, this is with a bit of guidance, an individual feed table for each cow, which will increase or decrease her amount of feed in the robot to most efficiently produce milk. So we're not necessarily looking for the largest amount of milk produced from each cow. We're looking for the greatest margin between the cost of the pile of nuts that we're feeding the cow and the amount of milk output that we're getting from her. No, sorry. So what we found we were struggling with initially, or why we thought we might be overfeeding our cows in the robot, was that on about 50% of our cows, like normal, 2 weeks before drying off, the nuts were taken down from the 5 or 6 kilos that she might have been feeding down to 1 kilo to try and reduce her milk production before drying off. About half our cows, the milk production dropped as soon as the nuts were pulled off her, and about half of the cows, the milk production just carried on as if nothing had changed. And it was a bit concerning that maybe those 4 or 5 kilos that we'd been feeding her that she wasn't converting into milk later in lactation, perhaps she's been not converting those 5 or 6 kilos all the way through her lactation. And as an example, a cow who is being fed 5 kilos more than she's converting into milk through her lactation is 1.5 tons of nuts. So you've spent 1.5 tons of nuts, and that cow has turned that into fat, or it's come through into her muck. And I like to give the analogy that cows are a lot like humans. There are some cows, there are some humans that can eat as much as they like and they'll never put an ounce of weight on, and other people that all they've got to do is look at a burger and they're piling the pounds on. And we found that cows are just the same, and you can't treat every cow the same, or just treating the average cow. You've really got to treat each cow individually to get the best and most efficient milk production from that animal. So our example is with the concentrate optimizer, we've halved our concentrate tonnage in the robots for the same milk production. We have increased our blend at the feed fence by 1 kilo to balance that out, to try and with the advice of our business advisor and feed advisors, just to keep the energy up. And that has equated to a £30,000 saving every year with this piece of software, just in nut sport for the robot. There is an offset with that, in that you would hope that the cows are eating more forage. They're converting more forage to milk rather than converting the concentrates to milk, but it's about a 2-to-1 cost in concentrates to forage production. So we would have to budget in an extra £15,000 for forage, but it's still a £15,000 saving every year, and we're not getting the fat dry cows, problems with calving, transitions that comes along with having fat dry cows. We have reduced our feed rate from 0.42, which admittedly is a bit on the high side, down to 0.32 litres fed, and our milk from forage has gone from about 6 litres up to 13 or 14 litres. So we've more than doubled our milk from forage, and our milk production has stayed the same. So it represents a huge saving to us. As part of the software, the feed price and the milk price are entered. So if there's fluctuations in your feed price or fluctuations in your milk price, that will affect the software. So if your milk price goes up, it may say, right, okay, well, then we can afford to feed these cows a bit more concentrate just to see if we can get a bit more milk out of it. Or if your feed price increases, it may drop the amount of concentrates fed, just to keep that margin as large as it can do. And our biggest example is we had a 60-litre cow who was having 2 kilos of nuts, or the robot wanted to feed her 2 kilos of nuts in the robots every day. We did have to artificially bump that up because she was getting a bit fed up of hardly getting any nuts for the 5 or 6 times a day that she was milking. But that just gives you an example of how efficient some cows can be if you are concentrating on it. So here, a bit like the ruminations, we've got a graph here that's showing the amount of feed actually fed. The important lines we're looking at here is the red line is the milk production, and the blue and brown line directly below that is the feed and the concentrate optimizer advice. So we can see to start with that the cow's calved and her feed is just going up on a raising plane up to about 27 or 8 days, I think that is. And then the milk production continues to go up, but we can see the amount of nuts fed actually falls. And then throughout her lactation, it's challenging the cow every day to see what's going to happen with her. It will keep reducing the amount of nuts that it's feeding the cow until the milk drops, and then it will sort of self-correct and say, right, I've got as low as I can get. Now I'm going to just try nudging the nuts up a bit every day and seeing whether this cow will give me any more milk. And it keeps challenging the cow every day, going up and down. You can see at day 72, it's decided that the milk is dropping slightly, so it's going to increase the amount of nuts fed to try and counteract this drop. And we can see a bit later on in lactation, the milk does actually respond, and it starts to bring the concentrates fed down through her lactation as she's going on, trying to maintain the gap between the amount of concentrates fed and the amount of milk produced. And there's an example of where we used to be. Our old feed table, anything over 45 litres of milk was being fed 12.5 kilos of nuts. So we were massively higher. The difference between what we're currently feeding our cows down here and what this cow would have been fed before concentrate optimizer software was installed is massive, and that represents a huge amount of money that would have been wasted. We would have got no more milk from this cow, but we'd have been piling the nuts into her. She'd have been putting weight on and getting herself into that fat dry cow status, leading to problems in the future lactations. And then moving on, this is an example of the cows ranked in daily average production. We can see we're from 42 litres here down to 40 litres. And our total program feed, we've got the top cow here being fed 7.36 litres, sorry, 7.36 kilos. And this is what the concentrate optimizer has decided is her optimum efficiency in terms of nuts fed. But we've got another cow that's giving half a litre less, and she's only being fed 3.69 kilos. But that's her most, so we've got a more efficient cow here. This is a slightly older cow, so we'd expect it to be a bit more efficient, giving a bit more milk for a bit less feed. But it just shows the difference. So we've got about a 4 kilo difference in the amount of nuts fed every day, and we've only got 1.5 kilos of milk production difference. That's some of the information that we can draw from the robots. If you've got any more questions, then please ask afterwards and I can go into a bit more detail. That was a brief overview of some of the information that we can draw from the robots. I'll hand back to John.
George, thank you very, very much. Excellent in terms of demonstrating the data, and we said you'd do that in the introduction, so thanks. I'm sure there's I've got questions coming in now on what you've been saying, so thank you. Right, okay, finally, before questions, we've got Elizabeth Thornley, and Elizabeth is the commercial product specialist for Laley, joining the company in February earlier this year. Poor thing, that was an induction into COVID, and I hope you've done really well to make it through to this year. And she covers the milking and cooling portfolio of products, and I know she graduated from Harper Adams with an agriculture engineering degree. Before she spent time with Laley, she was traveling and working in Australia. and she gained a lot of knowledge and experience as well from arable and crop storage systems in Lincolnshire. So she's got a wealth of experience, and she's going to just broaden the picture a little bit in terms of taking us outside the milking area and actually show some of the other areas of work that Laylee have been involved with. So it's over to you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So yes, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining today. I'm going to talk you through some of the new exciting products and concepts that we've got going on at Laylee at the moment. So you may have seen some of these if you joined us for our Laylee Future Farm Days in October. Aptly coloured, they were part of our yellow revolution. So firstly, I'm going to talk to you about Laylee Horizon. So it's our new farm management application that we have. Oh, sorry. So as I'm sure you all know, the world seems to be kind of changing and getting faster and faster, and it's no different in the dairy farming industry. Two key words amongst this growth are data and digitalization. And these words can kind of offer both challenges and opportunities. So at Laylee, we're wanting our farmers to be able to focus on what's most important to them, instead of being constantly alert to tech issues, which can then, when not be taken care of, impact on their margin. And it is hard work to make a good margin, as we all know, and farmers have to be able to decide and act quickly. When this virtual assistant takes care of the monitoring of your farm 24/7, helping with interpreting the data and supporting with advice, this creates time and space for our farmers to be able to focus on things that matter to them most and what's the most important thing to them. So what does digital dairy farming look like? So imagine just how much data a modern dairy farm generates, whether it's a Laylee farm with our astronaut, so reading identity on each cow, logging your milk and herd valuations, or our vector kind of keeping constant track of your feed and your mixed ration loads. And of course, you've got then people external to that, so your suppliers, such as feed advisors, your semen suppliers, and even veterinarians. They also have data about you and your herd and your farm. And it's all extremely relevant and important, but how can we make it useful? And what we're now looking to do is to connect all the equipment and the suppliers on your farm using smart algorithms, connectivity, and the cloud, processed into user-friendly information and eventually information that can lead on to practical advice for you. Laylee Horizon offers that. It provides farmers with the tools to work more efficiently and offers them more control in order to achieve their goals. So really, it elevates your data to forecast performances and offers you clear choices to optimize your farm. More than pretty much ever before, digitalization can work for you. We all carry phones, we all have laptops and things. It can offer you daily and scheduled routines based on your cow touches to be planned as logical and more efficient workflows, all there in your pocket or there in your farm office ready to go. And it offers you insights at the right time at the right places. I suppose we turn to that 80-20 rule. So 80% of labour is used on 20% of the herd. And this really sits in line with our other kind of Laylee mentalities with cow touches, where you designate your time to the cows that need it most, not the majority of your herd. One application and usable on any device with an interface that's consistent across all of them, so you can really get to know the layout and the feel for Horizon. It offers task-based working and knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. It really is the forward-thinking technology for your farm and the next advanced step. We offer the opportunity to have a clear overview and being supported in your daily decisions. Horizon optimizes the data and offers insights and proactive advice, connecting and combining it all for you. Farmers are professionals now more than ever, and Laylee Horizon is a serious application to support their work with transparent paper cow structure that's being implemented. So just to reiterate and kind of close off on what the new key highlights for Horizon are, it's giving you your daily decision support on the farm, your right-hand partner, to be able to have better insights and choices for your herd, your new farm management programme. and it's easy to use, and it's that really clean and user-friendly interface, and you can get it on all of your devices. So reaching your herd and your information has never really been easier for you. And it connects and combines not only our data, but outside suppliers' data as well. So whether you're looking for your single cow that needs attention, or whether you're wanting to have an overall view of your herd, or looking for information from a veterinarian that's recently been on farm, all of that information can be offered to you at your fingertips. And finally, it's really optimizing your farm flow. And that's really what we're about here at Laley, is taking dairy farming into the digital world and giving you the freedom to be more efficient and do more. Also, I'm slightly forward. So I'm now going to take you to the Laley Sphere. So it's a very exciting new product for our barn and feed portfolio, and it has also been made a finalist for an innovation award. So this is the Laley Sphere here, so another part of what was released on our Laley Future Farm Days. So at Laley, as I've previously mentioned, we're all about innovation and kind of trying to improve dairy farmers' lifestyles and kind of bringing things forward. So our vision with the Laley Sphere is bringing valuable nutrients to be reused and waste to be reduced. As we all know, cow manure has been and will always be a very valuable fertiliser, maintaining a really good structure in the soil and helping with the growth of crops. But while modern dairy farming has developed and moved forwards, the function of manure has been downgraded slightly, and a lot of farmers now, as standard practice, purchasing artificial fertiliser. Many people kind of still use it in conjunction, but it is being used less so. And with the Laley Sphere, what we're trying to do is we're trying to upgrade your manure again and improve the reuse of nutrients at the dairy farm, and get rid of that undesirable emission of ammonia and kind of win back some extra nitrogen for you, which can then be used as fertiliser again. And this system improves not only the barn climate, but the flooring as well, and generally keeping the environment safer. So it's a healthy and more pleasant place for your cows and for you. So in 2019, DEFRA released their Clean Air Strategy, which identified 88% of ammonia emissions in the UK were from agriculture, 28% of those being from dairy cows. So at Laley, with the tests we currently run on our farms, we're approximating 70% reduction in ammonia emissions. So again, this is really going to help with the government requirements for dairy farmers to reduce their ammonia emissions by 16% by 2030. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey now, our Laley Sphere journey, and we're going to go full circle. So we start with step one, which is the plant. So it needs 5 main factors for possibility of growth: light, photosynthesis, temperature, CO2 and water. So the plant needs fertiliser, it needs nutrients to grow. And as farmers, as people, the only thing we can really influence on a crop grown outside is the fertiliser. As much, I'm sure, if there was a golden ticket to be able to do the temperature and water as well, we'd love to be able to have that. But really, the only thing that we can have a direct impact on is what we feed the plant. So nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, these are the most common and the core 90% of nutrients that is required for a plant to grow. So we start with our nitrogen. So that's really vital for the growing up and outside of the ground. So it helps with the protein content in the plant, which again is of course really important for our dairy cows. And then we have our phosphorus, which helps with the rooting system. So that uptake of water, that uptake of nutrients from the soil being used by the plant and helping to grow. And then we've got our potassium, the vital role really in just the general balance of the plant. So many people now buy fertilizers with these nutrients specified out for you, so you know exactly what you're putting out there, and it helps because you can apply it at different stages. You can be really precise and kind of prevent losses and waste while maximizing growth. It's the most common way of working, but actually, as I said before, ruminants manure contains all of these, and it's a really good natural fertilizer, but currently we can't control what's in it. So you may not have the correct balance for your plants. And so again, it's not the most efficient way of working. And that's really where the Laley Sphere comes in. So we go to step 2. We're now going to talk about the cow herself. So she takes the feed we give her, and her output is generally split into three. So protein, around 25% to 1/3 of her output goes into milk, muscles and growth, things that are important kind of for her and the bits that we take on, the milk production. But then 2/3 are excrement, 1/3 is manure and 1/3 is urine. So realistically, she is slightly inefficient in her processes. And actually what we're looking to do here is maximise the usage of the cow's output and maximise on the efficiency whilst improving other environmental factors. So when manure and urine mix on the floor and it kind of goes with bacteria and fungi, the organic nitrogen in the manure is broken down and turns into ammonia, which is released into the atmosphere. So this is eventually brought down by precipitation as acidic rain. And of course, that can be beneficial for us in some ways. If it falls on crops or paddocks, great kind of free natural fertilizer, but it can also fall into natural habitats and end up in watercourses and damage different variety of plants, as some will thrive on nitrogen, others won't. And so it can really destabilize other environments and become less, and we get a less diverse environment. And this is something that we can avoid and that we'd really like to avoid. So how do we change this process? Well, the first step really is stopping it. So with the Leylee sphere, you implement some pieces in your barn. So we separate the urine and the feces by using separation strips, which are placed into the barn floor. They're a perforated piece of metal, which can be even retrofitted to slatted barn floors. So the urine flows directly into the pit here through the slats, preventing any kind of further creation of ammonia. So even within the first few seconds, we've stopped that chemical reaction. So already improving the air conditions within the barn. And then what's left on the top is your feces. And these are collected by the Leylee collector, one of our barn and feed products, and taken to a storage pit. So this solid fraction really contains most of the phosphates. It has some organic nitrogen as well, but it's majority phosphates. And storing it like this greatly reduces the actual volume of this phosphate-rich manure without the mineral nitrogen, which you've separated off already. So how do we then take that separation and use it and kind of capture those essential nutrients? So while the barn is being cleared and you're separating your urine and your manure, the Leylee sphere end capture, which is the box that you see outside of the barn, helps create a pressure in the pit. So we call the pit the underneath of the barn. So this results in an airflow. So the atmosphere in the barn is being pulled through the barn floor into the pit and then comes back through this end capture and finally released into the air. And this is the process where the gases are taken out. So you're also taking away that smell of the barn. And in one of our test farms, apparently, we have been told that you have the ability to go straight out to dinner after being at the farm all day, which would be a very novel idea, I'm sure, to many people. The actual gases and the ammonia is reduced so greatly that there really isn't a kind of smell around the space. So it's really important as well for capturing the nitrogen as we take out these pollutive gases. It's really important that we're capturing what we want to store. And then capture produces what we call a circular nitrogen fertilizer. So this red acid box releases a liquid and it falls over the gas. And as it comes out, it's capturing the nitrogen for us to keep and releasing clean gas into the atmosphere. So, and then this is stored in a fertilizer, waiting for the right time to be put to use. The fluid that remains in the pit contains mostly potassium. So you've got your pit and your manure collector, and these can be pumped out as you would normally and be used as organic nitrogen and phosphate-rich fertilizer. But they're all separated out, so you can mix and you can create your own quantities as you so wish to. So when you've got your fertilizer and you want to start using it, really linking back to Horizon, as I said, it all comes full circle. So you can link this with your Leylee Horizon. It will tell the information about your pit pressures and the quantities of minerals that you have collected, giving you that really strong insight into what you're producing and giving you the opportunity really to take charge over your fertilizer and how you manage it. And you can make these changes and gain this output and this fertilizer from your cow without having to affect your feed, your diet, or your milk performance. So really it's a good solution without having to make any major changes to your practice. You get more from your cows. So finally, I'm going to talk to you today about the Lely Exos. And this again is in the concept stage at Lely and was released on the Lely Future Farm Days. So I suppose, as I've kind of said before, becoming more circular in dairy farming and trying to be more aware of environment and practices, it goes beyond the separation of minerals in manure and bringing them back to the field. It's also really about preventing losses where we can, and some of those losses that we've picked up on are during harvesting, storaging and feeding. Now, the majority of dairy farmers feed their cows in the barn with silage, even during the grass growing season. An understandable decision, as fresh grass feeding is labour intensive and a complex process. However, at the same time, processing grass, creating silage and feeding is also time consuming and labour intensive. And kind of besides those points, really what you're actually looking at, even in optimal practice and conditions, 10 to 20% of valuable nutrients get lost during harvest, feeding and storage of grass. So really we can see a great future in robotics in the field, simply because the continuous growth of grass and other crops matches really well with our automation approach and taking over kind of repetitive work and doing things smarter, which is our real kind of push forwards for Lely. So that's kind of why we introduced the Exos concept. Automatic feeding with fresh grass results in considerable savings. If a dairy farm uses more fresh grass, it needs less silage and can save on concentrates and other feeds purchased. Experience at some of our test farms in the Netherlands has shown that a dairy farm can meet half of its roughage requirements with fresh grass during the growing season, from early spring to late autumn. And some of these savings on our test farms have reached 2 cents per litre of milk. Now, I get that this is a completely new approach to grass, and it really it was an opportunity for us to redesign mowing and harvesting technology. The system has been tailored to the daily needs of cows, and it's been designed to try and make the most of that grass growing season. So really taking on being more careful, the low weight and the soil friendly kind of technology. We talk about compaction. This machine means that really it can mow from early spring through to late autumn. And because of the technology that we've used and being careful, we're really ensuring that the grass is kept fresh and tasty for the cows as well, so it's not damaged in transit. And of course, we would always, as we are with Lely, we would want this to be able to use and really link in with the other products that you may have. So this can be used in conjunction with the Vector. So this is our automatic feeding system, and it can operate in tandem with the Vector. So both systems provide alternatively fresh grass and other feed components. The Exos constantly monitors the percentage of fresh grass going into the ration as the Vector delivers it, and the system also collects data in the field as well. So the farmer can respond kind of immediately as the grass supply changes at any given moment. So again, these are all products that will then link with your horizon as well. So you get that real turnkey solution in offering insight and automation onto your farm. So thank you very much for joining us today and for hearing some of our new developments. Very happy to take some questions, and yeah, excited to explain what we have going on at Lely.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Lots of new innovations coming forward, you can see there. I'm very conscious of time, and we've got lots and lots of questions. What I'm going to suggest is that we've got a few minutes. We're not restricted by time, so I do appreciate a few of you had to leave already because I guess you've allocated the hour slot. But I'm going to use chairman's prerogative and just carry on for a few more minutes using the time because we've got quite a lot of questions. I think if the speakers could turn their cameras on and mics on, please, that'll be great. Thanks very much. I think, George, you provoked a lot of queries and questions about the optimizer. And so what I'd just like to summarize a few of them, really. I guess quite a lot of them were asking about the marginal economics and whether or not the system takes into account fixed costs, and also do you run any risks with that system on compromising fertility? So if you could answer that one first, and then I'll pass over to Robert and see what his views are on this as well. Okay.
Yeah, the only thing, as far as I'm aware, the only thing that is taken into account is the milk price and the feed cost. But it's basing it either increases or decreases in parlour nuts feeding. But you do set up in effect a feed table that you'd like it to sort of base its decisions off in the background. So it's not just really doing its own thing. You do set parameters in the background to enable it to go up and down. But I have in the past had some people ringing me up concerned that all that's going to happen is that you're going to get a huge drop in milk. And I can understand that. In our experience, we didn't suffer any drop in milk at all. All we saw was we were spending a lot less money on parlour nuts, because for every cow that it's sort of reduces the amount of milk on, it will boost some of them up. And the long-term benefits of not overfeeding your cows is much more advantageous, like I talked about with the having fat dry cows or fat late lactation cows. It's sort of well known that that leads to poor transitions in sort of either calving difficulties or poor transitions into the next lactation, which will have a much larger effect on your fertility than the feeding in the robot. It does help that we've got the vector system as well, so there's always fresh food in front of the cows. And again, as I explained earlier, we're not trying to reduce the amount of energy that we are feeding the cows. What we're trying to do is to allow the cows or encourage the cows to take more energy from forage. Like I've explained, we've more than doubled our milk from forage, so they're still getting the same amount of energy, so the fertility shouldn't be affected. But what we're doing is reducing the cost of concentrates we're feeding the cows, and increasing the amount of forage they're eating for the same amount of milk.
That's excellent. And Robert, would you pick up on that, especially bearing in mind, I don't know if you use that system, but I think there was some questions about, obviously you're getting fantastic performance from what appears to be quite limited numbers of silage cuts, but also a grass-based system. So I think, first of all, the optimizer queries that were raised, and what about the comments back on how you make such good use of forage?
No, we don't have the concentrate optimizer switched on here actually. It was something I was quite intrigued to hear about. I don't know an awful lot about it, to be honest with you. We're not feeding too heavy within the robots anyway. We benchmark against about 15 different other farms, and we're probably one of the lowest feed rates in the robots. This kind of extended lactation thing is a thing that we're probably using a wee bit like concentrate optimizer, where we're kind of making the decision to allow a cow to work a wee bit longer before she goes back and calve again. So I suppose that's our own kind of personal way of doing a similar job. So it's one of those things, like we need to maximise the amount of milk coming off the system, but you do get to a point where those extra litres are not justifiable. So I would, like your system, I'm quite sure we could average between 40 and 45 litres all the time if I feed a wee bit more. But in our experience, it actually pays us to try and find the midpoint where they're efficiently fed, but there's plenty of milk there to sort out the fixed costs, and that's the way we've kind of set our system up over the years. And whether or not concentrate optimizer will maybe help me with that or not, I would maybe need to sit down and make the decision. As for forage, the type of farm we have, it's such a tight window really. We're quite an extensive farm, so we're farming quite a lot of acres in relation to a lot of other farms, so we can actually grow about 300 acres of first cut, and if we get that first cut right, then there's enough first cut there to feed all the milking cows on the farm for every day of the year. and we always find that the first cut is always the silage that the most milk comes out of, rather than second cuts and third cuts. For whatever reason in this area, the first cut's always the one that you get the most milk out of. So we've actually set our farm up to be fairly extensive and try and get as much use out of that first cut as we can. And that's how we really have to manage the forage in this part of the world. It's just the circumstances we're in.
Brilliant. And I can hear that, I think, a little one there in the background to give his to his dad. The caller's asked a question, and I'll come to you first, Robert, and then George. It was linked again to the optimizer. Does it was to do with, if you can identify the cows that do appear to be so much more efficient in terms of feed utilization, would you use that then in breeding decisions? Because feed conversion efficiency is obviously a very big factor in hitting sustainability targets going forward and making more from less. So first of all, any comments on that if you did access that data and information, Robert?
Well, yeah, no, as every cow is different, and I suppose, as George says, like I have to use the data that I've got in front of me, and then I have to make the decision. And what Lely's trying to achieve is Lely's trying to help us to make those decisions, and that's going to be a good thing going forward. You've got to bear in mind my system's now 10 years old, and it's probably, you've got to constantly challenge it and evolve, and that's probably something I'll need to look at. Currently, the way we're running the system, I'm using that data to decide whether or not to serve a cow or not. So as a brief parameter, really, if as a heifer and she's averaging 35 litres, we'll serve her when she's 50 days in heat. We also get the heifers that sit at 50 litres, and they'll sit there all the way to 140 days. And I would probably take the conscious decision not to use progesterone and those kind of drugs, because that's, I think, is going forward, I think that's getting a wee bit more frowned upon, where we're intervening with fertility. So we don't use a lot of progesterone or seeders or anything like that. We actually allow the cows to cycle naturally, and it's just I suppose it's a stocksmanship thing to be able to look at that data and decide how to manage those cows. And I think what Lely's trying to do is really to be a help me to make those decisions.
Well, what about you, George, in terms of if you were going to breed the cows, would you start
at the moment, we're still a few animals light on our system. Our free time is quite high, really, so we are breeding more animals to black and white than we would like to get to. And at the end, our breeding decisions would our barren cow decisions we'd like to get to the point where we're looking at milk speed and we're looking at feed efficiency as the two reasons why we either would or wouldn't keep a cow, because the limiting factor on a robot is not necessarily how many cows you're milking through the robot, but how much milk you can get off a robot in a day. So ideally, you'd have one cow standing in the robot all day, just milking constantly. You'd be putting food in at one end and taking the muck out. That would be the most efficient robot milking system, but it's not like that. So the speed that the milk speed does come with a few issues in terms of open T10s and more potential for mastitis. But if you can get to the point where you're making your breeding decisions on how feed efficient a cow is and how sort of her milking efficiency is, that is ideally where we would like to get to. And Robert's probably a bit further down the road in terms of that than we are at the moment. But it will be, as we build a herd up to get to looking to be more efficient, they will be two big breeding decisions we'll be making as to whether to serve a cow or not.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Got a few more questions. Yeah. I think you related back to this, Robert, which was how long do you think the Lely robot will last? Bearing in mind that some people have said that other robots start to fail because they don't keep up with their updates. I mean, you mentioned there just a minute ago that you need to probably update yours. Does that mean you've got to update your robots, or can you explain for anybody in the audience here how that system works? Because not everybody in the audience will be familiar with robots.
Yeah. And bearing in mind the guy that sold us the robots is listening into this call, I better watch what I'm saying here. But I think that more so the point that the machine's been upgraded all the time. So the fact, like, I've always run this T4C program, and they've come out with Horizon, which it'll bring something new, and they concentrate optimizer and all these things. It's constantly evolving. So over the last 10 years, you think, oh, it's running quite well now, and the next year they bring something else out, which makes it actually run even better. But it's just what you would expect with this kind of level of technology. Like if you look back at your phone 10 years ago, it was twice the size and it did a tenth as much. And that's just evolution. And I think you've got to keep looking at what's coming next all the time. I'm not saying that everything that comes out is right, but certainly it always progresses all the time. So you've just got to keep up with that. As for lifetime, for a machine that's working every single hour of the day virtually, I think they're very reliable. I think it's quite comforting that Lely have actually looked after us for all these years, and all the wee niggly things that's been wrong with the robots have actually improved with time. I would say when the A4 first came out, we were the very first A4 machine in the country, and it was quite challenging. There was a lot of issues with it. I would say the A5 machine is the A4 minus the problems. And if you're putting in an A5 machine today, it would be a lot easier than what it was for me 10 years ago. But it's nice that Lely have actually looked after us in those 10 years and have actually upgraded to our machine to what is the equivalent of an A5 really. I've always kind of had my head 12 years, somewhere in about there. 12 years would probably look at changing them. The fact I've got a resale value as well, it's a wee bit like trading in a tractor. For a taxation point of view, it's quite an easy thing to trade in. If you have a good year, I think it'll be a decision you take off the back of a good milk year and decide if that's the right time. But certainly I'm running them in their 10th year and I'm not seeing any more issues, certainly a lot less issues than I did probably 10 years ago, which is quite a comfort for anybody that's looking to put them in.
Oh, that's a great answer. I just want to pick up and bring in Elizabeth, because you were talking about the technologies there, Elizabeth, and there's one question here about robots and how can you make them work with grazing systems. Would you just be able to comment on that?
Yeah, of course.
The technical point.
Yeah, so we have a product called Lely Grazeway. So this is an ABC option where you can turn out cows, and it links in with your astronaut. So it has a tag reader, so your tags can go out to pasture and feed. You can have it on a rotational system. You can have time limiting factors on different paddocks, and if a cow is within X amount of time or hasn't been milked for X amount of time, she will be redirected back into the barn. So you know that cows will be back into milk. But actually, a lot of people have a conception that you wouldn't ever see two cows walk down a pathway in opposite directions, one going out to pasture and one going back into milk. But actually, we have grazeways on many farms, and they do. So cows know what they're looking for. They want to go and get milked. They do take themselves back to the robot and then can come back out. So we do have products to link in with that. So yes, you can research it. It's called the Lely Grazeway, and again, links with everything. You can set it on your phone. So like Robert was saying, he's got T4C. That's our current program. So before Lely Horizon, we have T4C and InHerd, which are two separate applications for desktop and app on your phone. And you can make changes to your pasture and your cows being allowed out, and which paddock they go into and things like that.
Excellent. All right. Okay. And we've got another question, and perhaps George, you might. I assume that both yourself and Robert, with the robots, are housing 24/7. Yeah. But if you are, and if you're on that system, then a good question here. They were asking, and you're obviously very interested in the data. What additional data would you like to see? What do you think's missing at present that you would think I would really want to see that would help my performance and me as a manager?
I do know that Lely, I think it's called the Milkalizer Company, and I do know De Laval do it, but milk progesterone testing is something that would really excite me. So when we were looking at going from the A3s to the A4s, we did look at the De Laval system with the milk testing, and it was very interesting. But as I do know that Lely have invested in a company that are also doing milk progesterone testing. So I have no idea where that is in production or testing or anything like that. But that would be the biggest, sort of the most interesting thing that I would like to see come on for the robots.
Excellent. Before, I could see Robert nodding there, so we'll get Robert's comments and then we'll come back to you, Elizabeth, in terms of developments. Robert, what would your view be?
Yeah, exactly the same as George. I think that will be a huge step forward if we know that a cow's in calf as soon as she's in calf, really. It can't be that far away because the technology's there already. I think the robots could also lameness detection. I think we could actually have a physical number in that rather than people actually having to do lameness scoring and condition scoring as well. I think there's no reason why they can't condition scoring for the top and look at weights and stuff like that. I think we can actually, there'll be a measurable thing that will come out within the next 10 years to both condition score and locomotion score for people that require that kind of information, and that will be a huge step forward. But the progesterone testing certainly is the one that I would certainly concentrate on as well. It'll be a huge thing when that comes out for us.
Yeah, I can certainly, from a professional point of view, that I think anything that keeps data capture away from humans is because the cow can't lie, can it? You know, and you can't deceive yourself. So there's a lot of benefit in actually having real animal data and live data that you can actually access. Yeah. What are the developments, Elizabeth? Would you know of any that are coming in the pipeline?
So nothing at the moment that we can that's being out for announcement. So no, we're not currently doing progesterone testing similar to Laval. We do have our reproduction modules, which we use our tags for. So we look at, we have smart algorithms which are looking at our rumination minutes and our activity, which are helping to predict our heat. And we can look at things about milk production and MQCCs. So we're not currently doing that, but as with anything, never say never. But no, currently we don't offer progesterone testing, and there's nothing that I can announce at the moment.
Okay. Fantastic. Right. Well, I'm very conscious that we've gone over time a little bit. I've allowed that to happen. We've got still a big audience out there and lots of questions have been asked. We haven't been able to deal with all of them, but I'm sure that obviously Elizabeth's here on the call. And I guess if there are people who've got specific questions, I think would that be okay, Elizabeth, if you were around and people can stay on and
yes, of course, absolutely, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that'll be fine. Okay, excellent. Matt, if you're there, I think I'm going to hand back to you. And before I do that, I'd just like to thank the speakers today. Some excellent sessions and really great introduction there from Robert, a top rate operator. Doing a brilliant job. I was making a note, nearly 1,000 kilos of solids per cow, and doing out nearly around 3 kilos a day of solids, which is absolutely amazing. And he's on a liquid contract. And then you've got George talking there in terms of all the use of his data. And you could see, I think, for those who are watching, the power of data and when it's proper data. I thought that was excellent. And then Elizabeth challenging us to make us think about all of these technologies that are coming down the line that might help us meet what are the challenges going forward. So Matt, thank you very much. I'll hand over back to you.
Yeah, just to echo John's thanks to the speakers, you know, superb, and social media has been crackling while you've been presenting as well. So, you know, it's a lot of people talking about what you're saying on there as well. Also, thanks to John for doing a sterling job of steering the ship through today's webinar. Thanks very much, John. I'm sure there's a virtual clap going on for you at the moment. So yeah, that does conclude today's session. So thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow at 10:30, we've got the animal health workshops, which will focus on 4 key areas. So risk and impact of TB on farm, then moving on to calf health, then managing mastitis, and finally AMR. So that will start at 10:30 tomorrow. So thanks very much to everyone. Stay safe.